We recognize that CVUUS gathers on the land of the Western Abenaki people. We respect their spiritual relationship to the land. We hope to learn from them how we can live together in peace and justice. Good morning, and welcome folks in the sanctuary, folks at home, to CVUUS, the Champlain Valley Unitarian Universalist Society. CVUUS exists to spiritually nourish, challenge, and sustain people of all ages and circumstances, so that they might lead lives of meaning, integrity, and service. My name is Becky Strum. I'm a member of this congregation, and today I'll be serving as worship associate for the Reverend Barnaby Feeder, our settled minister. This would be a great time, if you haven't already done so, to put your cell phones into worship mode. If you're joining us for the first time at home, please go to our website and send us an email, or if you're here with us today for the first time, you can sign our book outside the sanctuary, and then you'll be able to receive our weekly email blast. You can get to know us a little better, and we can get to know you a little better. And in that email blast, you'll learn each week about the many pathways for opportunities to connect outside of our Sunday services. So for today, check out your order of service, and if you're at home, remember to check out the website for many alternative holiday gift-giving opportunities. Yesterday, I took my gifts over to Helen Porter for a resident there, and a number of us are doing that, but there are other alternative gift-giving opportunities. And also in the order of service and the website, you will learn about CVUUS services and gatherings Christmas Eve and the Sunday after Christmas. And it's especially important these days with rising COVID cases locally to find out if we're going to continue as hybrid or if we have to go to Zoom. So many thanks to those who made this service possible today. I think I see Julia over there on the camera, Alan Moore, Rich Wolfson, Mary Hadley, Steve Butterfield for technical support, our choir, our flower co-op for holiday arrangements, Mike Greenwood and Avi Frund, and all who helped to set up and usher and greet. We gather here as individual people, young and old, temporarily able and disabled, all the colors of the human race, theist, atheist, agnostic, Christian, Buddhist, feminist, humanist. We gather here as a community of people who are more than categories. We gather here, each ministering to the other, meeting one another's strength, encouraging wholeness. We give thanks for this extraordinary blessing, the gathering together of separate, unique individuals as one whole, one body, our church. Here may our minds stretch, our hearts open, our spirits deepen. Here may we acknowledge our brokenness and be ever stirred by love's infinite possibilities. Come, let us worship. And now, as Reverend Barnaby comes up to light the chalice, please join with me. I can't see the screen, but I think the words are there of the chalice lighting or in your order of service. May this flame we light remind us that every one of us can bring the light of love to the world. May this clear flame be a symbol that every heart can burn bright with joy, peace, and harmony. May the wisdom of the ages speak to us through this flame and stay in us. Every one of us can be a blessing to the world. And now we're going to hear from Poppy, even though she isn't here. Today, we gather as a community of people who are more than categories. Reverend Barnaby is going to talk about radical inclusivity. And so when he and I were talking about the topic for today, I told him about a remarkable young person who I've been privileged to know for many years, and I want to talk to all of you about her, and that is Allie Stroker. Allie was the first actor who really is in a wheelchair to appear on the Broadway stage as a performer, and that first time was in 2015 in Deaf West Theater's revival of Spring's Awakening. It was a remarkable production. And then in 2019, she became the first actor to win a Tony for her performance of Ado Annie in Daniel Fish's Broadway production of the classic Oklahoma. Allie grew up in Ridgewood, New Jersey, where I lived with my family before moving to Vermont. 1 year younger than my son Alec, Allie and Alec went through the Ridgewood school system together and eventually were theater kids together. When Allie was 2 years old, she was in an automobile accident, resulting in a spinal cord injury that left her paralyzed from the chest down. The Ridgewood community embraced Allie from the beginning. Parents, kids, teachers, school administrators, and particularly drama departments. Allie was always part of the group, eventually, particularly part of the theater kids group. In the last couple of years of high school, my son's best friend, Pete, and Allie were a couple. These kids had been friends since kindergarten. In high school, they hung out together, partied together, performed together. Allie was in many plays and musicals, and each time appropriate ramps were constructed for her egress around the set. One of the roles Allie played, which I'll always remember, was Cosette, when my son played Javert in their production of Les Mis. Allie's parents encouraged Allie's love of singing and supported her natural talent. My dear friend Susan, who was Allie's voice teacher, helped Allie with the arduous process of applying to college musical theater programs, traveling all over the country with her to auditions, and talking NYU, which eventually accepted her, into the fact that a person in a wheelchair can in fact execute choreography. I believe that it's a blessing for my son to have Allie Stroker as his friend. Allie recently co-authored a children's book. It's actually a middle school reader's chapter book, and it's called A Chance to Fly, and it was actually Alec who connected her to her co-author. Her dedication, I just want to share. For every kid who has a dream, even if the odds are against you, don't ever stop finding ways to fly. So it is about a middle schooler who loves theater and getting to perform. It definitely took far too long for a person in a wheelchair to appear on Broadway. But I do believe that things are changing in the entertainment industry. Allie appeared this season on the TV series Only Murders in the Building with Steve Martin and Martin Short. And it's interesting that she says, she speaks all over for disability rights, and she is more often cast in roles that weren't really written for someone in a wheelchair, and that's a real advancement, she feels. So let's end this time for all ages, watching and hearing from Allie herself as Ado Annie in Daniel Fish's Oklahoma. And she does really do choreography. I just couldn't find the right clip to show you that, but does remarkable things in that chair. So our Share the Plate donee today is Charterhouse, and we are privileged to hear a testimony from Heidi Lacey, who is the Charterhouse Coalition Executive Director. So please be as generous as you are able.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm just going to do a quick sound check. If someone in the back could tell me you can hear me, that'd be wonderful. Thank you. First of all, thank you for sharing this invitation with me this morning and for your ongoing support and encouragement. As you know, Charterhouse is one of 2 homeless shelters in Addison County, and we are the only shelter that is a low barrier shelter and open 24 hours a day. Charterhouse means different things to the people we serve, our community, and the board of directors, staff, and volunteers that keep it open to all in need. I thought I might take this opportunity to share from the perspective of a few guests, both current and former, as well as staff and I, to give you an insight of what it means to be part of Charterhouse. I'll start with from the guests. During a recent exit interview, this was a quote from a young woman who was preparing to move. "I just want to thank you and the staff for everything you've done. I would not have gotten through the things I've accomplished without you. I'm a little scattered, you know. You guys have been very patient, even letting me have my dog here, which has been very stressful for a lot of us. Now I have insurance for the first time in years, and I finally got this lump checked out. That was huge for me. Even though I am moving out, I have my follow-up appointments all set, and my caseworker is going to go with me, so I don't have to do this by myself." From another man, joined us last fall. "This place has shown me that I can be okay around people. I feel pretty good, you know? Even if I'm depressed sometimes, I can talk to someone. Doesn't even matter what time it is. It helps." At each house meeting that we hold, which we try to do at least once or twice a month, we start with a gratitude, which means that each person present is given the opportunity to share something that they are thankful for. I'm just going to say what they've said. You all. This place. Jane handing me snacks. This family. Charterhouse. A roof over my head. Someone found that last puzzle piece. Staff. My job. I got my car registered today. That's a good feeling. And lastly, a woman shared with us that she was 14 days sober and had never felt better in her life. My staff and I share a passion for seeing people as people. We strive to create a safe place that allows a person's deepest vulnerabilities to be acknowledged and accepted. We make this our goal each day, as a matter of fact. We understand that healing and growth take time, and we are committed to digging in and just being with people as they need. The outcomes prove to be stronger, more trusting, and longer-lasting relationships that eventually help individuals set and reach goals around housing and better health. When I ask my staff what brings them to work each day and how they keep going after numerous hours of sometimes tough and demanding direct services, this is what a few had to say. The guests do, Heidi, and the fact that it feels like family. I have found my home away from home. This is from Tara, a newly employed essential services provider. From another staff, it would have to be the feeling I get when I help someone out. just to see the smile on their face, knowing someone is there for them, no matter what they're dealing with. This is from Frankie, our overnight manager, who at one time was also homeless. From another staff. There are many reasons why I continue to want to do this work. I feel deeply privileged, especially at my, insert young, age, to experience the journeys that take place here. This is from Ben, a Middlebury College graduate, former volunteer, and who we call the guru of quality guest experiences. Two case managers proclaim that they value the relationships that they can build with those that do not trust easily. They both recognize and appreciate they work with a group of like-minded people. The challenges are raw and constant, but the good outweighs the bad every time when we actively participate in the lives of our guests. We all agree that being able to take part in the lease-up and physical labor of moving an individual or family into a new home is simply delightful. We know this experience is a gift, and we look forward to helping many, perhaps not all, but many individuals reach their wellness and housing goals. Lastly, I will leave you with why I do this work, so that when you think about Charterhouse, you may reflect on this brief moment of sharing and feel good knowing that there is great work being done. I wholeheartedly believe that there is a ginormous stigma that follows those that are less fortunate, and that there needs to be deeper understanding and acceptance that life simply does not treat each of us the same. And in the end, that each of us should find it within ourselves to treat others as we would want to be treated. For everything and anything that you are able to do to help support this mission, we appreciate you. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
In case you're visiting, just a reminder that you're free to leave some money in the basket or to contribute directly online the way it's described in the order of service. And people watching on Zoom will have their own instructions on how to participate in the offering. Thank you. Thank you, Ronnie. One of the problems with our Christmas arrangement is I can't look and see you. I know you're always playing with a smile, and I feel it in the music. I have several milestones today, and the first I want to mention might not occur to you as a milestone if you think about it, but during this week, you got the news that the college was going back to completely remote learning. And that reflected a bunch of other adjustments that are going on around town. And this is one of the many milestones in the unfolding of this pandemic. And we have to remember that not everything we do in milestones is a milestone of an achievement or moving forward. That doesn't mean that they aren't important points in our life that tell us where we are. And so I appreciate the integrity the college has shown in staying on top of what the issue means to them, and the visibility that is out there for what they're doing. That is a guide for the rest of us. And so we'll take those milestones, positive and disappointing as they come, as we move through the pandemic. And it gets reflected everywhere. We have the trees. Normally we would have completed the milestone of decorating them by now. Instead, because of the interruptions of the pandemic in our church life, we're moving forward by bits and starts and much less formally. And I'll invite you to add to the milestone of decorating the trees during the postlude. If you want, instead of just listening to the postlude, you can come up and start helping with the decorating of the trees. This is of the three sisters of love, this is the beauty tree, and we decorate that with the ornaments the children have made in the past and anything else, and you'll find them, some of them in the box at the base. This is our community tree, and we have some cutouts on strings from last year and the year before of all the members of this community, and I've deliberately left up the pictures of people who are no longer with us for one reason or another, because they too are with us in spirit. Their impact in our community goes on year after year. And so there's peace cranes and other things you could add there. And this tree, the justice tree, represents our relationship with the Abenaki, and we have some things that can go up there. So if you feel moved during the time of the end of the service, come up and help us continue with the tree decorating and that rolling milestone of the season. We have a birthday milestone, actually more than one, but I got a notice from Helene Vandenberg that today is Larry Vandenberg's 78th birthday. And Helene said, I'm so grateful to have had this talented and caring person by my side for 60 plus of those years. So we've only had Larry here by our sides for a few years, and we're so grateful we can understand a little bit of what you feel, Helene. So thank you for bringing this to our attention so we could celebrate. And today is also my wife's birthday. She's at home with my brother and sister-in-law because her birthday is tomorrow, and they came back from California for a joint celebration. And we have my two nephews and a niece-in-law with a baby on board. So it's been a full house for us and a milestone weekend for our family. We've forgotten what it's like to entertain, so and how exhausting it is. So it's been an interesting weekend for us. And the final milestone I want to mention is the passing of Bill Staines, a folk singer. And we're going to be celebrating his life by singing one of his most famous songs, or at least one of his most famous songs in church circles. All God's Children Got a Place in the Choir, as we come out of our time of silent meditation. And so I invite you into that space where all the unspoken joys and concerns can come forward in your heart, and you can locate where you really are this morning before we go on with the rest of the service. And then the choir will rise and sing All God's Children Got a Place in the Choir. Oh no, Ronnie's gonna play it and sing it. Sorry. This is another one of our restrictions. It would have happened the other way if the case counts hadn't been going up. Silence.
In our ancient reading this morning, the Sufi poet Rumi is in conversation with God. My heart is so small, it's almost invisible. How can you place such big sorrows in it? Look, he answered, your eyes are even smaller, yet they behold the world. Our modern reading, we have the opening stanzas of a poem posted on Facebook this week by the Reverend Bob Janice Dillon. If you have ever seen the ripples unfurl from a pebble cast into the water, then you understand the whole story. How the Great Mother, after the explosion, in her wisdom, placed the center of the universe in each of us. So if you would know yourself, make yourself small enough to see your center in anything else.
It's always such a joy to have a real theater person doing my readings. I hear things that I don't hear in my own head, which is a lot because I hear a lot in my head. Just over 40 years ago, for reasons lost in time, I ended up writing a profile of the hat industry for the New York Times. Now, one thing I asked the experts as I was working on this article was, how many hats does the average person own? And the answers were always some version of more than they think. Nothing else about hats caught my attention more than that. I'm always intrigued by any little thing that reflects our misperceptions about who we are or what's going on. More than we think, less than we think, not what we think. Those words grab me. But back to hats. This is leading up to a story about this one that I hope will give you some positive Christmas energy, even in the midst of this pandemic, and so much else that could be deeply depressing. Now, the common assumption when I wrote my article in 1991 was that hats were a dying industry. We had all grown up with photos of the early 20th century where everyone seemed to be wearing hats everywhere. But almost no one we encountered in those days was ever wearing them regularly, if at all. I was surprised when hat makers told me that the industry was growing at a healthy clip. The growth, they said, was powered by baseball-style caps. The variety available was huge and constantly expanding. Many were intended to signify something beyond a style choice about the wearer, via emblems or symbols or actual words like this one, which says radically inclusive. Among my hats with the message, for example, are proclamations that I identify with the San Francisco Giants baseball team, the CVUUS youth group, the New York Times, and Star Island, that little pearl of an island off the coast of New Hampshire where there is a UU summer retreat center. We undercount our hat collections in part because most of us focus on one or two favorites. And I suspect that most of us, knowing we don't wear every hat that we own, have a general feeling that we certainly don't need more. I know that it's been a long time since I went out looking to buy a specific cap or hat. So fast forward to mid-November and the trip that Michelle and I took to South Carolina. Our first stop was in central South Carolina because we were making a home visit with the family of the amazing young woman who is our son Linus's partner. And we added 3 days in Charleston after that. Charleston's a beautiful, historic Atlantic Ocean port city that neither of us had ever visited. Wandering around that first morning in Charleston in search of coffee, we bumped into a small purveyor of what we sought that was called Biddy and Bowes. It had the casual look that you find in stores that turn out to be local treasures instead of part of some big chain. We went in and soon realized that nearly everyone working in the store seemed to be functioning with a physical or a mental disability. The slogan on their card said, 80% of people with disabilities are unemployed. We're out to change that. In addition to the mostly young people working there, there seemed to be others with Down's syndrome or other conditions who were hanging out, learning how to make pastries for sale, or simply doing their homework. When we asked who Biddy and Bo were, the woman who handed us our orders said that they were the two of the children of the shop's founders. Both had Down's syndrome, which, as some of you know, is a genetic disorder thousands of people are born with each year in the United States. Some of its most common symptoms are delayed physical development or mild to moderate intellectual handicaps, higher risks of a number of conditions like hearing loss and eye infections, and to varying degrees, distinctive facial features like a slight flattening of the face or small ears. Many of the handicaps that children face with Down syndrome can be reduced with therapy, and they thrive with support from loved ones determined to provide as many opportunities as possible to participate in what society calls normal activities. Biddy and Bowes struck me as an unbelievably hopeful space. This was in part because Michelle and I had been acutely aware our whole time in South Carolina, and especially in Charleston, of how nearly every bit of its glory was directly traceable to its role as a primary hub for an economy totally grounded in enslaving people for over 2 centuries, mostly Africans stolen from their homelands and their descendants, but for many years as well, indigenous Americans. The legal end of slavery during Civil War did not, of course, end the oppression of racism as wave after wave of Jim Crow laws and other forms of discrimination unfolded. I want to be very clear about one point here. The North is also a creature of this tragic past and its ongoing impact today. Like many of you who have been studying this, I can discern signs of it everywhere I look, even in this brave little state, as we like to call ourselves, that was a pioneer in outlawing slavery. That said, it was still a shock for me how much more visible this history is in Charleston. It cropped up in everyday language where the words enslaved people have yet to replace the word slaves in the patter of the tour guides, where some people still refer to the War of Northern Aggression instead of the Civil War. And it was visible in the very architecture of the buildings, which we knew were built entirely with slave labor in the historic district. Huge populations of enslaved people were housed at different times in different situations in the city in order just to keep it running. And all that evidence is right there in your face when you tour. This was weighing on me on our second day in Charleston when we returned to Biddy and Bowes for more coffee. This time, I took a look at some of the merchandise for sale, and there was this hat, the one I now felt certain I needed. And if I had known it was there, I would have gone out to buy it. It wasn't to keep the sun out of my eyes, although it was very sunny during that week. It was to carry with me a reminder of, in Rumi's words, what to do with the mysterious blessing that my small eyes can behold the whole world, good and bad. Now, Rumi is a little misleading because he doesn't cop to sight being a mixed blessing without insight. To literally take in all an eye can see, I would need a godlike field of vision. And like all of us, I could make better sense of what I do see if I had a fuller range of intellectual and emotional skills. But I get some helpful advice about that problem from the first part of Rumi's poem. A big part of living with what we can see is coping with how it impacts our hearts that are so small that they are nearly invisible in the grand scheme of things, but in which the universe routinely parks big sorrows. Enter radical inclusivity. As I have pondered why I was drawn to become a billboard for the words radically inclusive, which after all could be read as a boast on the head of the person who's wearing them, I've begun to imagine radical inclusivity as a wonderful parking attendant for our stuffed hearts. If I imagine radical inclusivity as a person, I see them as young, sort of unfocused and not particularly reliable looking, but give them the keys to your life, and radical inclusivity can do wonders with compassionately arranging the jumble of joys and sorrows stuffed into our hearts. Without radical inclusivity's help, it's often not obvious that there's more room for compassion and justice in our hearts. For me at least, and perhaps for you, it's not intuitive that dismantling racism is related to dismantling social prejudice for people who are disabled or any other group of marginalized people. It's not that hard to see intellectually. We can see the connections between all of these impressions intellectually. Lots of writers are pointing them out these days, but it is hard to feel we can live into the scale of this complexity without losing ourselves in the world's neediness. And let's be honest, we don't really want to sacrifice ourselves that way very often. Not many of us would sign up to be saints, knowing the prices that saints pay. Not many, I would wager, at least in this congregation, to judge from the popularity in UU worship services of Mary Oliver's poem Wild Geese, with its reassuring opening words. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. But if you do not have to be good, and we recognize some truth in that that's very important to us, we do say you have to strive to be inclusive in many ways in our UU principles. We preach inclusivity when we affirm the inherent worth and dignity of every person. And we're wrestling with expanding that because of the proposed amendment calling on us to respect the inherent worth and dignity of every being. We preach it when we call for equity, justice, and compassion in human relations. We preach inclusivity when we affirm the acceptance of one another on our different spiritual paths. Inclusivity lies at the heart of our seventh principle, that universalist call to respect the interdependent web of existence of which we are a part. And we certainly preach it in the proposed eighth principle, calling on us to act to build a diverse, multicultural, beloved community by dismantling racism and other oppressions. That embrace of inclusivity in so much of what we affirm and try to promote makes the ideal of being radical about it the real point of this message, and why I needed to buy this cap. The word radical adds a lot to this issue. The way I find it easiest to understand is to think about our Radical Love giveaway. Now, a little bit of congregational history here that some of you never knew because you're relatively new, or some have forgotten. In that skein of pictures there, one of the pictures in the front is of a youngish woman named Piper Harrell, who quite a few years ago gave a lay-led sermon, and this was right after the Trump election, and she said, life is such a mess. I'm in need of love. I'm in need of some radical love. And that idea really spoke to a lot of people in the congregation. So when we came around to our fall fundraiser the following year, and we had been concerned about classism issues, instead of having a traditional auction, we invented what we called the Radical Love giveaway. And we asked everybody in the congregation to give 4% of their pledge just as a gift, which would raise roughly the amount a successful auction would raise. Totally separate from that, we asked everybody to offer goods and services and things like that that would be distributed by a raffle in which everybody would have equal opportunity. Everybody in the directory got tickets to that raffle. And those of you here will remember, because we could gather in big numbers, we had all of the events represented around the edge of the room on tables, and Carl was going to take people to the baseball game, and he had a catcher's mitt there to receive all the tickets, and people who were cooking had skillets, and some people just had jars. But it was an event that was a giveaway, but the interesting part of it was, well, how do we make it radical? And some people were basically offering what they had offered at the auction in the past, which was wonderful. But there was a little group of us who were sort of tasked with having conversations with people about how you could radicalize it. So I don't think I'm going to be picking on Rich Wolfson because he knows I've talked about this in the past. But so Rich has a wonderful sourdough starter that's over 40 years old that he has often offered in auctions, and he offered it the giveaway. And he was convinced there's no way to radicalize it. It's just a starter. And I said to Rich, well, radicalizing it would be if you went to people's homes and helped them make the first batch in their kitchen. Well, Rich is kind of an introvert, and why would people want me to come into their homes? Was his first reaction. And I said, well, you won't know unless you offer that, but that would be a way of radicalizing it. Francois Clemens has offered to put his voice on an answering machine. And if you've ever heard the version we have on ours, you know that's pretty radical but to radicalize the gift, I said to Francois, you know what would make this a really radical gift on your part is if you let the person you were giving it to also put their voice on your answering machine for a week. Francois said, oh no, not going there. So what was interesting was the exercise of how you could take something that is a gift and make it more of a gift. And through our work with that, and we're doing it again this year as best we can with the pandemic restrictions. And those of you who haven't checked it out yet can, at the table over there, see everything that's on offer. And you were supposed to have signed up by the end of this week, but I think you've still got a couple more days and a couple more hours. Okay. Well, one of the people who's organizing has just said a couple more hours. So those of you who are listening at home who haven't yet done that, make sure you do that right after the service. And people who are here who haven't done it, maybe go over to the table, check things out, and do it so that you can participate in the giveaway. You've got more than a couple more hours if you want to participate in the financial donation part of it. But the giveaway part of it ends soon because we're going to do the drawing. Anyway, with my understanding that this is what we mean by radical, basically amping up the love part of whatever it is, the fellowship part of it. It was pretty natural for me to ask myself how Biddies and Bows came to feel like it's a space where you could say it was radically inclusive. So I did a little research on Amy and Ben Wright, Biddy and Bo's parents, which quickly led me to the discovery that the family is actually based in Wilmington, North Carolina, where they opened the first Biddy and Bo's coffee shop in 2016. Charleston opened in 2018 and was their first choice on where to expand. And so despite the homey appearance of the Charleston store, it's part of a chain that now encompasses 23 franchises in 12 states and Washington, D.C., with more on the way. But this is unlikely to ever strike you as a Starbucks-like enterprise. On the website advertising the franchising applications, the Wrights say that they are operating a human rights movement disguised as a coffee shop. Franchises are chosen in part for the demonstrated track record of supporting family members and others with Down syndrome and other disabilities in the business plans that are geared towards hiring disabled workers. And the family's interest in this extends beyond Down syndrome. Lily, their oldest child, has diagnosed autism. And so that's another form of disability that they're very aware can be normalized in many ways by people who are trying to do that. And while federal labor laws allow people to hire disabled workers at less than minimum wage compensation, Biddy and Bose does not. If you're one of their franchisers, you have to pay at least minimum wage. So there you have it, a business model that is not just inclusive, but radically so. And it's a reminder that everything we do toward making the world better is capable of being radicalized with some love-driven, out-of-the-box thinking and an intent to regard acting justly as our sacred calling, which, according to the Christmas story that we will soon be celebrating, is what Jesus was born to teach us. But radical inclusivity is not seasonal or confined to the universalist aspects of Christianity. And that's why I'm going to conclude with our second reading, that Bob Janice Dillon poem that says, if you have ever seen the ripples unfurl from a pebble cast into the water, then you understand the whole story, how the Great Mother, after the explosion, in her wisdom, placed the center of the universe in each one of us. And then it's the closing advice that I think is so central to understanding radical inclusivity. So if you would know yourself, make yourself small enough to see your center in anything else. The most radical route to inclusivity is to imagine yourself actually centered in everything else that needs to be included for this to be the world you want to live in. May it be so. Blessed be. Thank you, everyone who's come today to hold this space, for everyone who can't come yet for safety reasons. Heidi, thank you so much for coming to tell us about the donee we're sharing our plate with this month. And we'd be happy to have you back any other time you'd look to visit. I want to repeat my reminder that if you're so moved during the postlude or after the postlude, you want to do a little decorating, just sashay on up to the altar here. And meanwhile, I invite you to go out into the world knowing that you have it in you to radicalize all the little things you do with just a little bit more love. You're creative enough, and you have a value system that will point you in that direction if you just stop and think and breathe a little bit. And you have in this community a whole bunch of people who will be there with you, cheering you on, egging you on, helping you if you have an idea that requires more than two hands. Blessed be. Amen.